$2 million. That's what my mother-in-law thought my dignity was worth. In that instant, I froze. The conference room at the Sterling estate fell silent, except for the crisp sound of paper sliding across mahogany. I stared at the buyout contract, my company's name printed in bold letters next to a number that made my stomach turn. $2 million for a business I'd built from nothing, a business that 3 venture capital firms had just valued at $50 million. We were 72 hours from IPO. I looked up at Patricia Sterling, her perfectly manicured fingers still resting on the document, her expression as cold as the February rain lashing against the windows. Next to her sat a woman I'd never met, though I knew exactly who she was, Isabella Romano, the childhood sweetheart, the one that got away, the ghost my husband had never quite managed to bury. "Sign it," Patricia said, her voice carrying that particular brand of upper-class contempt I'd grown familiar with over 5 years of marriage. "Sell the company at a fair price, file for divorce, and we can all move forward. I've already arranged for the papers." My husband, David, sat at the end of the table, his eyes fixed on some point beyond my shoulder. He wouldn't look at me. That's when I knew. Not just suspected, but knew with crystalline certainty that I'd been played. Not for days or weeks, but for years. It took me 8 years to build my fortune. 8 years of coding until my eyes burned, of pitching to investors who looked through me like I was invisible, of proving myself in an industry that still couldn't quite believe a black woman from Detroit could write algorithms that would revolutionize healthcare data security. And I truly believed I had found a second family when I married into the Sterlings. God, I was naive. Let me back up. My name is Maya Chen, and if you'd asked me 3 months ago, I would have told you I had it all. A tech startup that was about to make me legitimately wealthy. A husband who, while admittedly struggling with his art career, I believed loved me. A mother-in-law who, yes, was difficult, but what mother-in-law isn't? I met David at a gallery opening in San Francisco 5 years ago. I'd been dragged there by my business partner, Lee, who insisted I needed to do something other than work for once in my life. David was showing his paintings, these brooding abstract pieces that I didn't really understand but pretended to. He was charming, self-deprecating about his art, and when he looked at me, he really seemed to see me. Not my company, not my bank account, just me. We got married 10 months later. Small wedding, despite Patricia's protests. She'd wanted the full society affair at the Sterling estate in Napa Valley, but I convinced David we should do something intimate, just us and close friends. I thought I was being practical. I didn't realize I was making an enemy. Patricia Sterling was old San Francisco money, the kind that comes with a hyphenated family tree and opinions about who belongs where. When David told her he was marrying me, her first response wasn't congratulations. It was, "Does she know about Isabella?" I learned later that Isabella Romano had been in David's life since they were children. Summer camps in the Adirondacks, cotillions, the whole aristocratic circuit. They dated through college until Isabella went to medical school in Milan, choosing her career over following David to art school in New York. Patricia had never forgiven her for leaving, and she'd never forgiven David for letting her go. But I didn't know that then. I knew they dated, sure. David mentioned it in passing, the way people do when they want to seem honest without actually being vulnerable. Oh yeah, Isabella and I were together for a while, but that was ages ago. I appreciated the transparency. I didn't realize it was a warning. The first year of marriage was good. Great, even. David was supportive when I stayed up until 3 a.m. debugging code. He brought me coffee and kissed my forehead and told me he was proud of me. When my company, Secure Health, landed its first major contract, he was the one who suggested we celebrate, who made reservations at that impossible-to-get-into restaurant, who toasted to my success with genuine joy in his eyes. The second year was when things started shifting. David's art wasn't selling. Gallery after gallery turned him down. He started drinking more, spending more time in his studio, which really meant spending more time staring at blank canvases while getting progressively more depressed. I tried to help. I bought him supplies, encouraged him to try new styles, even quietly funded a small show at a gallery whose owner owed me a favor. Patricia hated that. "You're emasculating him," she told me over lunch at her club, a place where I was always acutely aware of being the only black face in the room. "A man needs to provide. You've made him dependent on you." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled politely and changed the subject. Year 3, I brought David onto Secure Health's payroll as our creative consultant. It was a made-up position, basically me paying him a salary to make him feel useful. He designed our logo, did some marketing materials. It wasn't much, but it was something. Patricia called it charity. David called it support. I called it love. By year 4, Secure Health was taking off. We'd secured contracts with 3 major hospital networks. Our encryption technology was getting written up in tech journals, and investors were circling like sharks who'd smelled blood in the water. I was working 18-hour days, flying to conferences, negotiating deals. David started missing dinners. Then he started missing entire weekends. "I'm at the studio," he'd text, "working on something big." I believed him because I wanted to. Because I was too busy building an empire to notice my marriage was crumbling. Because when you're a black woman in tech, you learn early that you can't afford to be distracted, can't afford to be anything less than perfect, can't afford to let anyone see you sweat. And then, 2 months ago, everything changed. I came home early from a canceled meeting to find David on the phone, speaking Italian. I don't speak Italian, but I recognize the tone. That soft, intimate voice he used to use with me. When he saw me, he hung up quickly, guiltily. "Who was that?" I asked. "Nobody." "Client. Since when do we have Italian clients?" He changed the subject. I let him because I was already running late for another meeting, another fire to put out, another crisis that needed the CEO's attention. But I remembered, and I started paying attention. That's when I noticed the charges on our credit card. Small ones, easy to miss, international calls. Flowers sent to an address in Milan. A wire transfer for $500 labeled personal gift. When I asked about it, David got defensive. "It's my money too," he said. And technically, he was right. We didn't have a prenup. Patricia had been against it, called it unromantic and suspicious. I'd been too in love to argue. So yes, legally, my money was his money. But $500 to Milan? To someone he wouldn't name? I hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus, a former FBI agent who specialized in corporate espionage but did marital work on the side. Within a week, he had answers. Isabella Romano had returned to the United States 3 months ago. She'd taken a position at a research hospital in Boston, and she'd been in contact with David since before she moved back. But it got worse. The wire transfers weren't gifts, they were debts. David owed money, a lot of money, to a private gambling club in Macau that he'd been frequenting during his art research trips. $500,000 in debt, to be exact. And who'd paid it off? Patricia Sterling. Marcus showed me the bank records. Patricia had wired $500,000 to the club 6 weeks ago. In return, David had signed something. Marcus couldn't get the exact document, but he could tell me what it was. A promissory note giving Patricia control of David's marital assets should I ever try to divorce him. I sat in my office, looking at the evidence spread across my desk, and I felt something crack inside me. Not my heart. My heart had been broken before. No, this was something deeper. This was the moment I realized I'd been so busy being successful that I'd failed to protect myself from the people who were supposed to love me. That night, I did something I should have done years ago. I called my lawyer, Jennifer Wu, the same woman who'd helped me incorporate Secure Health. I told her everything, and she said 4 words that changed my life. "Do you have a prenup?" When I said no, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Maya, I need you to listen very carefully. Under California law, anything acquired during marriage is community property. That includes your company. If David files for divorce, he's entitled to half of Secure Health. $25 million, half of everything I'd built, gone." But Jennifer wasn't done. "However," she said, "there are options. First, we need to move your assets into a separate trust before any divorce papers are filed. Second, we need evidence of financial infidelity. And third, we need to move fast." We worked through the night. By dawn, I had established the Chen Family Trust, a separate legal entity that now owned 60% of Secure Health. I'd transferred the shares before market open, technically before any divorce proceedings could freeze assets. It was aggressive, possibly challengeable in court, but Jennifer assured me it would stand if we could prove David's fraudulent behavior. The evidence part was easier than I expected. Marcus had been thorough. Photos of David meeting with Isabella at hotels, records of the gambling debts, emails between Patricia and Isabella discussing the transition plan. They'd been sloppy because they'd underestimated me. They thought I was too busy working to notice. They thought I was too in love to fight back. They were wrong on both counts. Which brings me back to that conference room. Patricia's buyout offer. Isabella sitting there like she'd already won. David's cowardice. $2 million for a company worth $50 million. It was insulting. It was laughable. It was exactly the kind of move someone makes when they think they're playing chess against someone who doesn't know the rules. I looked at the contract again, really studied it. The language was clever. It wasn't just a buyout. It was a dissolution of community property, an acknowledgement that the company was marital assets, a waiver of my rights to future earnings. If I signed this, I'd be admitting that David owned half of everything, and I'd be selling both our halves for pennies on the dollar. Who drafted this? I asked quietly. Patricia smiled. My attorneys. The best in the state. I'm sure they are. I pushed the contract back across the table, but I'm not signing it. The temperature in the room dropped. Patricia's smile vanished. Excuse me? I said no. I stood up, gathering my things. I'm not selling my company. I'm not divorcing David for $2 million. I'm not doing any of this. Then we'll force you, Isabella spoke for the first time, her accent making the threat sound almost musical. We have lawyers too. We'll tie you up in court for years. We'll freeze your assets. We'll make sure your IPO never happens. By the time we're done, your company will be worthless. I looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time. She was beautiful. I'll give her that. Classic features. Expensive clothes. The kind of polished elegance that comes from a lifetime of being told you're special. But her eyes were hard. This wasn't love. This was business. You're welcome to try, I said. And then I dropped my own bomb. But you might want to know that the company you're trying to force me to sell, I don't own it anymore. Well, not all of it. Patricia went very still. What are you talking about? The Chen Family Trust owns 60% of Secure Health as of 7 a.m. this morning. The trust is a separate legal entity, established before any divorce proceedings, funded with my separate property. David has no claim to it. David finally looked at me. Maya, what did you do? I protected my work, I said simply. Something I should have done a long time ago. Patricia's face was turning an alarming shade of red. That's fraud. We'll contest it. You're welcome to try. But you'll need to prove that I established the trust with the intent to defraud, which will be difficult since I established it weeks before you made this offer. In fact, one might argue I established it because I discovered evidence of financial infidelity on David's part. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. I'd had Marcus prepare 3 copies, one for each of them. I slid them across the table. That's documentation of David's gambling debts, your payment of those debts, and the promissory note David signed giving you control of marital assets. It's also evidence of David's affair with Isabella, including hotel receipts, phone records, and some very interesting emails between you and Isabella discussing how to extract maximum value from the tech wife. Patricia opened the folder. Her hands were shaking. Where did you get this? She whispered. I'm a cybersecurity expert, Patricia. Did you really think I couldn't hack an email account? I smiled. Don't worry. I did it legally. Well, mostly legally. David gave me his passwords years ago. Spousal privilege. The room was silent except for the sound of rain against windows and papers being turned. I watched them read, watched the realization dawn. I watched David's face crumble, watched Isabella's mask slip, watched Patricia age 10 years in 10 seconds. So here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice steady. I'm filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery and financial fraud. I'm seeking a division of assets that heavily favors me, given David's waste of marital resources on gambling and his affair. I'm also filing a restraining order against both you, Patricia, and you, Isabella, for harassment and attempted corporate espionage. Corporate espionage? Isabella sputtered. That's ridiculous. Is it? I pulled out another document. This is your research proposal from 3 years ago when you were at the Milan Institute. Notice anything familiar? She went pale. It's remarkably similar to Secure Health's proprietary algorithm, almost like you'd seen our code, which would be impossible unless someone had shown it to you. Someone like, say, my husband, who had access to our systems as a creative consultant. I'd found it by accident, really. Marcus had pulled Isabella's publication history as part of his background check, and something about her latest paper had seemed familiar. When I compared it to our codebase, the similarities were undeniable. She'd taken our work and tried to pass it off as her own research. "You plagiarized my company's intellectual property," I said. "That's theft. It's also grounds for losing your medical license and research position." Isabella looked at Patricia. Patricia looked at David. David looked at his hands. The conspiracy was crumbling, each of them realizing they were in far more trouble than they'd anticipated. "Wait," David said. "Maya, please, I can explain." "Can you?" I turned to him, really looked at my husband for the first time in months. "Can you explain why you gambled away $500,000? Can you explain why you gave my proprietary code to your ex-girlfriend? Can you explain why you sat there and let your mother try to steal my company?" "I didn't know," he said. "About the code, I mean. Isabella said she wanted to understand my work, wanted to see what you did. I thought I was helping her understand me better by showing her confidential business information. David, you signed an NDA when you joined the company. I didn't think it mattered. You have so much. The company's worth millions. Would a few lines of code really hurt?" And there it was. The fundamental truth of my marriage. David had never seen my work as real work. To him, it was just computer stuff, just algorithms, just something I did that happened to make money. He didn't understand the hours, the innovation, the sheer intellectual effort that went into building Secure Health. To him, it was just there, like a trust fund he'd married into. "Get out," I said quietly. "Maya, get out. All of you. This estate belongs to the Sterling Family Trust, which means legally it's Patricia's. But the apartment in the city, that's mine. I bought it before we got married. David, you have 24 hours to collect your things. After that, the locks will be changed." "You can't do this," Patricia said, but her voice had lost its edge. She knew I could. She knew I already had. "Watch me." I gathered my folders, my bag, my dignity. "Oh, and one more thing. Patricia, you might want to review your own financial records. Because according to my accountant, you've been embezzling from the Sterling Estate Trust for the past 3 years. Small amounts, easy to miss, but over time, we're talking about nearly $2 million. Her face went white. "That's a lie." "Is it?" "Because I have the bank records right here. Want to know how I got them? Your son. David has been a signatory on the trust account since his father died. He gave me access years ago when we were doing estate planning. It was a bluff, mostly. I had some records, enough to make the accusation plausible, but not enough to prove it in court. But Patricia didn't know that, and the fear in her eyes told me I was right. "So here's my offer," I said. "You leave me alone. You let the divorce proceed quietly. You don't contest the asset division, and I don't report your embezzlement to the estate board or, more importantly, to David's younger sister, who I believe is next in line to manage the trust." Patricia and I locked eyes. She was calculating, weighing her options. Could she fight me? Probably. Would she win? Maybe. But it would be messy, public, and potentially criminal. Was it worth it? "Fine," she said finally. "But David gets something. He's still my son. David gets whatever a California divorce court says he gets after accounting for his adultery and waste of marital assets. My lawyers estimate that's about 10% of the marital estate. He can have the art supplies." I walked out of that conference room and I didn't look back. I could hear David calling my name, could hear Patricia's angry whisper, could hear Isabella's shoes clicking on the marble floor as she ran after me. I didn't care. I was done. I drove back to San Francisco in the rain, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind already moving forward. Jennifer had the divorce papers ready to file. The IPO was scheduled for next week. I had work to do. But first, I had a phone call to make. "Lee?" I said when my business partner answered. "It's done. I'm out." "How'd it go?" "I think I just declared war on the Sterling family." She laughed. "About time. Listen, I've been looking at the numbers for the IPO. We're going to be rich, Maya. Like, stupid rich. We already are rich. No, we're comfortable. This is different. This is buy your own island money. This is never worry about anything again money. This is freedom. Freedom. I like the sound of that. The divorce took 3 months. Patricia tried to fight it, tried to claim I'd hidden assets, tried to paint me as the villain, but the evidence was overwhelming. David had committed adultery. He'd gambled away marital funds. He'd stolen intellectual property. The judge was not sympathetic. In the end, David got 12% of the marital assets, which amounted to about $3 million from our joint accounts and the apartment sale. Not bad for 5 years of marriage, but a far cry from the $25 million he could have claimed if I hadn't protected myself. Patricia was investigated by the Sterling Estate Board. They found the embezzlement, just as I'd suspected. She was forced to step down, and David's younger sister Caroline took over. Caroline and I had always gotten along. She'd been quiet during the marriage, overshadowed by her mother's strong personality, but she'd always been kind to me. After the divorce, we stayed in touch. "Thank you," she told me over coffee one day, "for exposing what Mother was doing. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how to prove it. What will you do with the estate? Modernize it. Make it actually profitable instead of just a monument to old money. Maybe you could consult?" I smiled. "Maybe. Let's see how the IPO goes first." Secure Health went public on a Tuesday in May. Opening price, $42 per share. By closing, we'd hit 65. My 60% stake was worth $90 million. Lee and I sat in the office, watching the stock ticker, drinking champagne, and crying. "We did it," she said. "We did," I agreed. David sent me an email that night. Just 2 words. "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. What was there to say? Sorry doesn't ungamble $500,000. Sorry doesn't unsteal intellectual property. Sorry doesn't give me back 5 years of my life I spent building a man up while he was plotting with his mother and ex-girlfriend to tear me down. But here's the thing. I won. Not just in court, not just financially. I won by walking away, by refusing to let their betrayal define me, by building something so successful that their petty schemes couldn't touch it. 3 months after the IPO, I got another unexpected visitor. David's sister Caroline called me, asked if we could meet. When she arrived at my new penthouse in the city, she wasn't alone. She'd brought David. He looked terrible, thinner, older, haunted. "I'll leave you 2 alone," Caroline said, and slipped out onto the terrace. "What do you want, David?" I asked. "To apologize, for real this time, not just in an email." "Okay. Apologize." He took a breath. "I was weak. I let my mother manipulate me. I let my own insecurity and jealousy turn me into someone I'm not. I gambled because I felt worthless. I reconnected with Isabella because I wanted to feel important. And I helped my mother try to steal from you because some part of me resented your success." He looked up, tears in his eyes. "You deserved better. You deserved everything." And I threw it away. "Yeah," I said. "You did. Can you ever forgive me?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. Could I forgive him? Maybe someday. Did I want to? "David, the problem isn't whether I can forgive you. The problem is that you're only sorry because you lost. If your mother's plan had worked, if you'd successfully stolen my company, would you be here apologizing? Or would you be living off that money, telling yourself you deserved it?" He didn't answer. We both knew the truth. "I hope you get help," I said finally. "For the gambling, for the codependency with your mother, for all of it. I really do. But I can't be part of your recovery. I can't be the person you apologize to so you can feel better about yourself." "I understand." He stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I really did love you. I just didn't know how to love you more than I loved myself." After he left, Caroline came back inside. "How'd it go?" she asked. "As well as could be expected. How's he really doing?" "Therapy. Gamblers Anonymous. He's trying. Mother's not making it easy, but he's trying." "And Isabella?" Caroline smiled. "Lost her research position when the plagiarism came out. Last I heard, she's back in Milan, working at a clinic. Very quiet, very far from the spotlight. Good." We talked for a while longer, about business, about the future. Caroline wanted to modernize the Sterling estate, turn it into a profitable venture. She wanted my advice on technology integration, security systems. We ended up forming a consulting agreement. It felt right, taking the Sterling money legitimately this time, on my terms. A year later, I sold Secure Health to a major tech company for $200 million. I walked away with $120 million after taxes and distributions to investors and employees. Lee and I started a venture capital firm, focusing on funding women of color in tech. We called it Second Chances Capital. Our first investment? A young woman from Detroit with an idea for revolutionizing education technology. She reminded me of myself 10 years ago. Brilliant, driven, naive about the world. I mentored her, taught her what I'd learned the hard way. Protect yourself first, trust but verify, and never ever let someone make you feel like your success is something to be ashamed of. I bought a house in Napa Valley, ironically close to the Sterling estate. I filled it with art from emerging artists, talented people who just needed someone to believe in them. I thought David would appreciate the irony. I never remarried. Dated, sure. Had relationships, but I learned my lesson about prenups and separate property. More importantly, I learned to value my own company. I learned that being alone is not the same as being lonely. I learned that the only person's validation I need is my own. Sometimes, I drive past the Sterling estate. Caroline's done amazing things with it. It's a working farm now, producing wine, hosting events. Patricia lives in the guest house, diminished but not destroyed. David got his own place in the city, supported by a small trust Caroline set up for him. He's painting again, I hear. Small shows, nothing major. He seems happy, or at least more at peace. As for me, I wake up every morning in a house I bought with money I earned. I work on projects I choose. I invest in dreams I believe in. And when I look in the mirror, I see someone who fought for herself and won. That's worth more than any marriage ever gave me. That's worth everything.